Welcome to the Eternal ROI podcast, where we share the real stories of workplace transformation. And now, here are your hosts, Will Stewart and Chris Patton.
Welcome to the Eternal ROI podcast. Good to have everybody listening and watching in. We have a great show for you today. My name is Will Stewart, joined as always by Chris Patton, CEO of His Way at Work. Hey, Chris.
How are you, Will?
Doing fantastic.
Great.
We get to talk to a lot of great CEOs, presidents, business leaders.
Yes, we do.
We have another great one today.
I think we do.
Yeah.
This is a good friend of mine. His name is James Reuter. James is president and owner of L&R Pallet, and we're going to let him tell a good bit of his story, some of the things that he's gone through in his business. Well, I'll just leave it up to him. But welcome, James. Appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
Yeah, so for those who don't know who you are, your business, kind of what you do, let's give us an overview of kind of just where you're located and what you guys do.
Well, I am located in Denver, Colorado, and I like to tell people that I'm in the people business instead of actually the pallet business, because what we've learned is the widget isn't necessarily as important as what you do during the day with your team and your staff. Yeah. My family started this company in 1974. I didn't want anything to do with it. It was my, high school job, my college job, and it took me a couple years out of college to realize that I had a good opportunity to come back and join the family business. And my wife and I were married in 93, and we both started working here full time in 94 and took over the business officially in 2015. So it's what's really nice is I don't have to explain what pallets are anymore. Pinterest has made that a big help to me.
So you guys do decorative pallets? Is that it?
Well, there's a little bit. I would have never thought. I mean, it's trash to most people, right? But now we have our dining room ceilings covered in it. We have many walls. I mean, it's fancy now. So yeah.
My wife has strapped many a pallet to her car and brought it home for a project that she found, on the side of the road somewhere. So
yeah, I always love those calls when somebody wants to buy one. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm like, can't help you, but
we'll sell you 1,000.
Yeah, so
exactly. What you said you wanted nothing to do with the business? We hear that a lot from generational businesses. What was your plan, James?
I was pre-med. I had. Dad worked us hard. I have a younger brother, and coming into the, company, it was labor, it was hard, it was dirty, and we put in long days, long hours. And of course, I thought there had to be something different, easier. I don't know why I thought medicine was that solution for me. And I often make the joke, Chris, that I've saved more lives by not pursuing medicine than if I would have went into that.
Understood.
So you decided, what was the thing that made you kind of change your mind to go from pre-med to now you're sucked back in the business again?
My dad had, we had 12 employees at the time. And I honestly wish I could remember like the day that we both decided we're going to join this company and start working, my wife and I. I think I was just wanting to get away from it more than I was paying attention to anything, and my parents weren't pressuring us to get involved. There was no end game for that. But looking back, I'm just so thrilled with the career choices that I've made, the lessons God's taught me and what we've been able to do with this. And I'll also tell you that, I've been doing this 25 years officially. It's really my whole life. It's the only job I've ever had. But God just used 2020 to humble me in an entirely new way. Because, at the beginning of this year, my wife and I we're tired of doing pallets. Not tired of doing pallets, but it's not sexy. It's not creative. It's not artsy. We're in a manufacturing business, and we started talking about all these other things that we could do that would be fun. And then COVID came, and we learned what, essential meant. And God just kind of reminded us of like, look what I've given you. Look what I've given you to steward. And so, we've just got a whole new appreciation for what we've been handed from the Lord. Not so much my parents. My parents converted the business to us a few years ago, and we built it 20-fold from what we were doing when I came in and got involved. But it's just, I've been extremely thankful this year in a whole new way because we've been so incredibly busy.
That's great. So, you have a different outlook, as you said in the very beginning of the show, of what your business stands for, of not just, making a widget, just making something, but actually improving people's lives and investing in people. Did you always have that mindset? Was that something that you had going in, or if it wasn't, when did that start dawning on you that maybe I need to make this company something more than just making pallets?
2020 is a 10-year anniversary from when I was badly embezzled from my entire management team in 2010, and so most of my experience, my journey, my growth in Christ, my change in philosophy about how I run this business has been in the last 10 years. And I was raised as a Christian, mom and dad, raised in church. We were Christian business owners is what we thought, but I never understood what that meant. I never understood I don't want to say necessarily responsibility, but the opportunity that we had with the people around us. And growing up, I built most of the business in the 90s, and the work pool was incredible. It was endless. There was always a line at the door. You didn't have to invest in the employee as much, and it was easier to take it for granted. Fast forward through the 90s and to 2010, when I had people that I trusted take advantage of us, and it was to the tune of, almost $750,000 that I lost in about a 6-month period. And we were just coming out of the 2008 crash, and we had the business should have been healthy, and I couldn't get the financials to tell me anything, and there was no cash for sure, and it was just a bad deal. And on April 1st of that year, I figured it out and terminated my whole executive team. Lost my controller just weeks later, and it was a complete rebuild. Wow. And during that time, I was desperate for one, right? And I was trying to do everything myself. My wife and I were just putting in crazy long days, but I was on the plant floor, I'm in the office, I'm everywhere. But I was just trying to what do I want to do different? I mean, my place was full of poison. It was full of employees that weren't ideal. And God took me on a journey, and I'd like to tell you that I was smart enough to have the entire plan, but he held my hand and brought me along.
So when you decided to change that culture, you're saying there's employees that weren't ideal. I mean, it sounded like it was a reboot from the bottom, from the top down, from the bottom up, however you want to say it. Mm-hmm. How did you start to change that culture?
Well, my wife, I give her so much credit. Thank the Lord for wonderful women in our lives. Yes. She took a missions trip to Peru with our church, and I was too busy to go on mission trips. I was here trying to hold a business together. So this is 2012. We've gone through a couple long years of hard times, and it was the first time in my life where I realized what it was like to not want to be awake. I wasn't suicidal. I didn't have thoughts of ending anything, but I was stressed. And when I wasn't awake, I was able to escape, and it was tough. I'd actually relocated to our basement just so I didn't bug her if I was getting up and trying to work. But she takes this mission trip to Peru, and I'm thinking that's for everybody else. That's not for James. I don't have time for that. And she comes back, and her and my boys had just experienced something pretty amazing. They were both fairly young then, and it just kept begging me to go back. And that was in March. And so in October, I went down there, and my heart just got ripped out. There's Bible verse it talks about your stubborn, stony heart being removed and replaced with a fresh and new, vibrant heart. And I knew, looking back, that that's what happened with my first trip down there. I thought I was supposed to get involved with this ministry. I was seeing things that were being done with the organization, and the whole time God's like changing me. He's working on me. He doesn't need me to do anything. He doesn't need me to come to the rescue. He just used that journey to tenderize me. And I made 6 trips in the next 2 years going down there trying to figure that out. And in the meantime, I was extremely desperate for employees. And I had some experience in the 90s during the Bosnian War of hiring refugees. And I sat my team down and I told them things that I had done wrong, though. I brought the refugees in and treated them like the generic work pool that was available. When you work with Spanish workers, you think that if you've got a translator and you can communicate with them, we get very accustomed to that. But I knew that I had probably failed in the fact that I didn't create any community for them. So we revisited that whole thing. And I called the refugee placement agency here in Colorado and just asked them what ethnic groups were coming into our region. And they give you kind of a shopping list, but they started describing these people from Burma and, farmers, hardworking, not necessarily educated, but good with their hands. It just sounded like a lot of the migrant workers that we had worked with through the years, but they also looked like some of the people from Peru. And it just like touched this. It was like a kiss on the forehead from the Lord of like, hey, I'm putting this thing together for you. And within this was October of 2013, when we first started to hire from Burma. And we made 25 hires between then and Christmas. But that was what kind of launched me, and God was just connecting those dots. He brought the resource together. He gave me a sensitivity to it, and he just gave me the desire to slow down, do things differently, and that was really the key, slowing down. We were used to doing it one way. There's always been a certain way. We had production numbers that were up here, and we didn't have that same group of people to work with anymore. So it was a real reset, but that's kind of what brought us up to the beginning of the new L&R palette.
So any resistance? Did you face any resistance either from within or from outside, or even peers that saw the different path you were taking in the hiring of these people from Burma? Because it's not the norm in your business, right? It's not what you've been doing. You suddenly change direction. You're doing something that might look kind of odd. What was the reaction from those around you?
Well, I always give long answers, but
it's quite all right. We've got time.
It's a podcast.
I just made a new hire. I was trying to find somebody to run my plant the whole time. And I knew I wanted godly people around me. I started to learn what the relationship with God looked like. And I just started to lean in him. I don't know if this is what it took to get me there, but obviously the timing points to that. But I moved a guy here from Michigan, good believer, as many years in the industry as myself. His father had several pallet companies, and we had known of each other for quite a while, but we just knew it was really a God thing for him to come. And not only that, is he didn't agree with what I wanted to do, Chris. But he wanted to please me. He was a guy that I love. I love my boss. I love James. And though I don't get this right now, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And, I didn't hand it over for him to go make this happen. You have to feed it from the top down. This was a decision that I was making. I was asking them to come on board with it. And I was asking them to basically change the way of thinking. Now, having just cleaned house with my entire staff, everybody we were bringing in was new. I was hiring people that didn't know of, necessarily of how it was before. Right. But we've got a handful of employees that have been with us 20, 25 years, even a 42-year employee, and they saw how we did it for a long time. So there was some resistance when I was going to say we're going to do things differently. And as they started to try to build this community, God was also hitting on me from other sides. It was the first time I ever heard what C12 was and convene. And, I was finding out about these Christian businessmen leadership roundtables and found myself in an event here in Colorado. It was the first annual Christian Businessmen's Leadership event. And I went down to this thing, and a gentleman by the name of Paul Cuny was given a presentation, and he had written his book, Secrets of a Kingdom Economy. And, I'm sitting in this chair, hearing for the first time in such a new way that business, if it doesn't belong to you, it actually belongs to God, which we all kind of say, but I don't know if we get that. Then the Lord should be the one that's staying up all night worrying about stuff. You don't need to do that. You can start to lean on Him, and that it's not your responsibility necessarily to make it all happen. We all say that, the Lord's my provider, but do we get what that means? And I was ready to bite into that. I was like, if you're really my provider, that can change the way I do business. That can change the way I interact with people. Not every piece of business is a good business just because there's lots of zeros behind it. And I realized in a moment one afternoon when I was trying to get my team all dialed in and treat others as you would like to be treated, just basic golden rule stuff, I realized that I had customers that were treating us awful. It's still, and this is nothing I've changed, 8 years later. If we have a customer that treats us bad, I won't do business with them. I couldn't see if I had a customer call on the phone and yell at the person taking the order, and then that person gets all wound up and they send it off to the production floor, and those people are you're fanning this flame, and the truck driver gets in the truck and he drives over there as fast as he can. And as soon as he gets there, he gets yelled at and screamed at, and he comes back and he slams the door. And I'm like, I don't want to work here anymore. I'm thinking, I got to protect these guys. That's not fair to them. If it's not the dollar, I'm not worshiping the dollar. I don't have to have that customer. When you ask about pushback, I sat down with my management team and we picked out 3 of our top 10 customers, and I said, I'm gonna go sit with these guys and have a come to Jesus. That this isn't acceptable. I don't feel like you're not treating me like I'm a partner. You don't seem to appreciate what we're doing. You don't understand that we're going through all the same unemployment hurdles that you are. We're shorthanded. You're shorthanded. Your poor planning becomes my problem. I mean, and my sales team is just like, oh my gosh, boss, do you know how many zeros are behind that? And I went and had those meetings, and I fired 2 of those 3 customers that day. I literally said, I'll fulfill my last PO, and I'm picking up my equipment, and I'm done. And that sent a ripple effect through my team. They were shocked at first, of course, and then secondly, they're like, wow, if he's willing to do that, if he's willing to walk away from money, he's probably serious when he asks me to be nice to my coworker and to lead a certain way. And so I was just having this desire to do things, but I had to show it. I had to lead by example. And it was so amazing to watch God mend one of those relationships quickly. They came back to us on our terms, and then replace the other one, 5-fold. It was just it was an opportunity for me to start to, wow, this is how you can walk it out. This is how the Bible works. This is what it means if it's His. And I started kind of shifting to this philosophy of, in Genesis, the Bible talks about the day actually starting in the evening. And I kind of feel like when I lock up the door at 5:00 in the afternoon, that, all right, God, get going. I'm going to take over sometime in the morning, but the day will be half over, and you tell us where we need to play ball. But Yeah, I hope that answered your question. But there was resistance, but also they knew I wasn't kidding. I mean, it wasn't optional, and they all quickly knew that.
So, yes, that answered the question and some. I ran out of follow-up questions. In my head, I had like 8 or 9 I'd gotten up to.
I'm sorry.
No, the point is that's everything you just said, James, is what we're trying to communicate in this podcast.
Yes.
And I go back to the very first one, and this, I can't even, you did it better than I could, but I want to hit back on it again. I want you to tap into this a touch. It's not your business. It's God's business. And we can say that, we can think we even mean that, but then when the pressure is on, when the situation gets desperate, what do we do? Do we turn to Him, or do we turn and change the way we behave? Do we change the way we make decisions? Do we suddenly say, all right, core values are key when things are fairly normal, but as soon as it gets tight, I'm going to have to make some tough decisions, and that integrity thing is going to be put to the side for a little while, or this caring for our employees. I just can't afford to do that right now. We've got to get business. All those are behaviors and reactions to pressure when and it's going against what we say. This is God's business. Yep. So
yes.
The other thing, here's what I wanted to say. You have said is His business. And the biggest thing that I hear when I hear you say that is I'm changing my perspective from a 30, 60, or 90-day measurement of the success of this business or of this decision or of this next initiative, and I'm changing it to whatever God's time frame is. That's one, right? It's what's important to Him, not what's most important to me. But the second thing here's where the question is, and sometimes I can go a long time without even getting to a question. Here's the question, though. You mentioned firing or willing to fire 3 customers, making this huge statement to your leadership team, going out and living it out, and then God provided in replacing those or bringing them back. But not all the time does it turn into such a happy ending to a situation where you make a decision that you know God is leading you to make. Have you had times where that didn't quite turn out in a positive way, at least in a business measured positive way, where maybe you're even still waiting on the positive result out of that? It just hadn't quite happened like you thought it would. I mean, it's a challenge to the prosperity gospel, is guess what I'm saying, right? Sometimes we'll make decisions. God is going to provide. It just might not look like what we thought. Any example like that?
I'm a blessed man, and I can tell you that the last 10 years haven't been all gravy, but I don't have anything that I can actually think of that has been a bad call, or we had to make a really tough decision for the right reasons that hurt. I just feel like, we've been on the top of the roller coaster for a little while, and, we just we know who we are. We spent the last 7 years, and I kind of mark October of 13 as the beginning of it, but it was probably 3 years after that. I mean, 3 years of starting to fumble our way through how do we change culture? How do we get buy-in? It takes a while for everybody to understand that you're actually in a different canoe. You're going this way now and not that way. And, I had a long-term employee that he wasn't getting it. And I love the guy. And after our second meeting, I actually said, you know what? I need you to bring your wife in. I need to sit down with both of you, because this is, this isn't just you that works here. This is your family. This is everybody behind you. And we could talk more about, the size of the influence you have. But I sat her down with him and I said, listen, this is a change, and I need both of you to get on board. I need you to help him. I need you to support him. I don't need the chit chat in the background. I go, I don't want to let him go. I want him here, but I go, this is real. And he made the turn, and there was a lot of just hard conversations, but I was very adamant about this. And, it's kind of what you were describing a minute ago about how we get so busy, everything gets in the way. I had been through a mess, and I'd started to. I always thought that was worse than any current mess I was in, and I continued to have problems. I had production problems. I had quality problems. We would do some of the silliest stuff just over and over, like you just couldn't get it right. And I had the choice to either beat the people and get the result I wanted, which is what we normally do naturally, or I can love on these people. I can invest in them. I can help them with the stuff they've got going on in their lives. And I made that my priority, and it took care of this other one. That's not normal. Most people don't handle it that way. But when we started to see the value of investing, and as I started to, so I joined C12 at the time, and I was just starting to, on top of hearing about these secrets of the kingdom economy and it not belonging to you. And, the one I like is, God, my pastor always says that God can win a poker game with a pair of twos. The math is different. The formula is different. And I'm like, if that's true, if I'm going to walk this out, then I don't have to walk in fear of my decisions, but I do need to make sure they're not my decisions, and bringing the opportunities to the Lord, sitting down and I mean, everything that comes across my desk, if you deal with pride, it's pretty easy. Like, I've got this, I can do this. I built a successful business on my own, but I kind of come to the point where, like, Lord, I'm not so bright. I'm like, I need you, because everything you've done is much better than what I can do. I lay it before him. Do you want me to work with this customer? Do you want me to deal with this vendor? What does that look like? But I have to sit down with the owner of the business and invite him in. Yes. And when I started to make that a priority, when I started to make prayer time a priority with my team, I'm like, this isn't just something we do in a crisis. This is something we shut down. We do this. We didn't do this officially until this year. We've had a Bible study once a week for quite a while, but COVID raised the bar a little bit. Many more people were open to the gospel and open to the Lord getting involved. But I'm like, we're shutting the office down for 1 hour every Wednesday for lunch. We're putting a sign on the door. We're shutting the phones off. And I promise you, it'll still be there when we come back. And we, it's because it is a priority. It's not something we do when we have time, Chris. And
yeah,
as you know, it's hard for a business owner might want to do this and they feel overwhelmed. I highly recommend always having somebody help you. There's if your company's not big enough to hire somebody for that position, I guarantee that you've got some employees with this caring heart. We can dig more into that and what that looks like. But there's always somebody that wants to help, that wants to be a part of that. And it's really important to not do this alone. I wanted to drive it, but I have to carry all these other batons. And that's the main reason I see other business owners that want to do this stuff never get any traction, because they don't get some help, and you have to have some assistance.
Yeah, that's a great point, James. So I do want to dig into that. So I want to hear from you. You've touched on, you're bringing these refugees in from Burma. You're bringing in a different type of workforce, but you've also got some employees that have been there for 25 and up to north of 40 years. What specifically does L&R Pallet, what do you guys do to love on and care for your employees? What are some examples of ways that you're specifically caring for these employees, some differently than others maybe, making the community, like you said, for the refugees? Give us some examples of what you're doing, and maybe how you would recommend a CEO that wants to start down this path, not real sure where to get started.
Okay. Well, and one thing I want to be careful to do is not polarize anybody. A lot of times when I start talking about the refugees and the things that we did for them, people are like, well, I don't relate to James. I don't have that kind of, my employee pool isn't that way. And so they immediately discard what I say.
Write it off.
And I always remind them, it's like, God didn't give anybody the short straw. Your situation is yours. It's not going to look like mine. And you just got to ask God, like, give me a nugget, just one thing, just something. And like, where do I start? What do I do? And for me, the first thing that we implemented was just hiring chaplains, having chaplains come in. And again, as a CEO, we love outsourcing things. And I'm like, wow, we can outsource religion. I'm like, that, sign me up for that one. But I watched that we were very successful in doing. I saw these men come in and we had to get creative. I had 5 of them. When I talk about having 25 refugees hired after a couple of months, it was a nightmare. We had 17 languages and we didn't even realize it, but we discovered it because we were having injuries and we just realized we weren't communicating, going back to my comments about communicating and translating, and there's a huge difference. But we started streamlining how we were doing our hiring. We were recognizing all these basic needs. And then we brought in chaplains, and I watched them start to get some stakes in the ground. They were building relationships, and those organizations, they'll give you reports back, no names attached, no specifics. But, I'm looking at some of the conversations and I'm like, wow, that's what gets accomplished with a 1-hour visit a week around L&R Pallet. What if I do this all the time? Because I'm just always that all in kind of guy. And I'm like, if I do it with the same intensity that I'm used to, what can we get done? And as I was starting to hear these concepts about faith at work and what that looks like, I started searching for companies that were doing great things. And I actually ran across a company in Lubbock, Texas called Beat and Bow Homes. And they've just become my mentor. They're the best in the business in my part of the country, and a completely different demographic. All of their workers are architects and land developers and, business development. They were doing ministry to a group of what some might say, I don't want to say high maintenance, but different than my labor pool that I was doing. So, and yet they were having so much success. And I just went down there and I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they were just celebrating life with people, and so when I'm talking to another business owner, I'm like, don't overthink it. One thing they're looking for is they want you to be consistent. You can't tell them you care and not have any follow through. But, we started to find that you could celebrate anything with a cupcake. And I mean, whether it's just good attendance, whether it's birthdays, whether it's anniversaries, we just started doing basic. We care, we love on you. This isn't show, this isn't to feel good. We're trying to get to know you. And we kind of started to just learn what was working and what wasn't. And Rick from Beat and Bow, he just looked at me one day and he started to challenge me about, James, you're a church, you're a pastor. You have this opportunity to speak into the lives of not the 130 people that walk through your front door every day, but there's 700 with their family members. And then add your vendors, add these people that you're interacting with. And you have a huge congregation, far larger than the average size of a church in America. And you can't have a neutral encounter. You're going to have a negative one or you're going to have a positive one. And he's just like looking at me. He's like, what are you going to do with that? And here I am. I've just gone through this whole mess of people stealing and cheating and almost closing my doors. And then I'm like, Lord, I've discovered this is yours. I've discovered these people walking through my day. I mean, I didn't want to get up. Just getting up every day to sell another pallet, you're like, oh my gosh, right? I'm like, he gave me this whole nother purpose. And here I am falling in love with the people of Peru. And I see the same faces walking through the door every day. It wasn't coincidence. And so, we developed, as I ramble, we developed a lot of programs. I ended up actually hiring a full-time employee. My culture and care director was the title we gave her. I first called her my ministry director, but I had to explain that too many times. So it was much easier to shift her into that role. But, her full-time job was to become a navigator for people. And when the Lord was starting to show me, he used the Peruvians, he used the people from Burma, I think to soften me, to say, wow, there's so many visible needs. And then one of the mistakes I made, guys, is that I immediately wanted my management team to take care of them. I was kind of like, it's us and we need to take care of them. And the Lord one day is like, you've got managers who've got addictions. You've got there's marital problems. There's somebody slept on their couch last night. Their kid didn't come home. Their teens are struggling. And he just started to show me, it's like, they're all broken. Every single person walks through your door. The three of us on this call, we're broken. We've got junk in the trunk, and old school philosophy is you can't let that interfere with work. You deal with that on your own. And I was just like, how can any of these guys deal with that on their own? If I want good employees and I want to be productive, I need to help them be better at their job by trying to help them with some of that, try to relieve some of that. So our cupcake parties, our celebrations, our life things started to take a deeper dive. And, it's just how can we help you navigate what you don't understand? And endless stories of things we've been involved with, but the important thing is we didn't have to be the expert of it. You can certainly connect with so many organizations in your community that's what they do. We just wanted to vet them and kind of create a preferred vendor list for our employees of carrying partners that could come alongside our people and help them with that stuff. But we had to be willing to do that. We had to carve a place out in the workspace to do that. But when we did that, it multiplied the available time because we weren't doing so much crisis, right? It was it's not logical. It's just the way it works.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a stretch here and say that you've had turnover problems in the past. When you go into a caring culture like you're doing, and you're the thing that comes to my mind that Holly Beatonbow said to me, because I know Rick and Holly as well, they were on previous episodes of this podcast, but Holly said the verse that just stuck out to her is, don't just pretend to love these people, really love them, right? And so when you start really loving these people that work in your organization, then the needs that pop up, it frankly becomes fairly easy to start addressing those needs, right? You can start doing the things you need to do. But it also has business benefits, right? That's your love for the people is not a manipulation to get them to do more pallets. It's you're loving them and you're trying to take care of them because it's God's business. But are you seeing any business impact from turnover dropping or more loyalty from your employees as you build this community? What are some of the positive results from the business side?
Well, I used to make fun of Rick because he cried a lot, but then I just realized that's what the Lord does to you. When you just start to care in such a different way. And it was last Thursday, I was sitting in my car finishing up a phone call, and I watched one of our very tall built pre-incarcerated workers. He'd come out of prison, which I feel like is somewhere God's taking us now with a slower influx of refugees, but he's huge. He's 6'2", 270, and he's walking in next to a 5-foot flat, maybe 90-pound refugee, and they're side by side. And I just watching them walk together, I started to cry. I was just like, God, look at these people you're bringing me, and they've got their own background, their own story. And I find more purpose in helping them with a situation than I ever do about filling a delivery. But, to do ministry, you have to be profitable. That's where this big confusion sometimes comes between the nonprofit world and business as a ministry, which what we're doing. We have to make money or I can't do these other things. So that means we have to be excellent. Right. And I often tease, and they're getting better, so the joke might be getting dated, but I'm like, I don't want to be like a Christian movie. As soon as you hear it's Christian, it's going to be so. I'm like, when people in Denver hear that I run a Christian company, I want them to know that means excellence. I mean, that means there's something different. That means that I'm the one that can get it done when nobody else can. And, the Lord, he's blessed us with that. And our turnover, we do have turnover. But it used to be 300 or 400%, meaning, of 130 employees, you're hiring 6 people a week. I mean, just churning them. And our goal was like, let's close the back door. How do we get them from leaving? I don't need to keep having 400 applicants a year. And that was kind of the light bulb. I got to change why they stay. And we're not a destination job. It's not glamorous. We do have people that stay for a long time, and it's something that they're comfortable with. But I had to embrace, like, people are going to leave here. So if I can stretch it from 3 weeks to 3 years, what a big win, knowing they're going to leave, and we've kind of like just changed instead of just being crisis, how can I invest in their lives? How can I help them get better decisions? If I've got somebody coming in that's just come out of the correctional system, it's just an awful job. It's just dirty. But I'm like, yeah, but give me a couple of years. Let me help you get your feet under you. Let me help you get grounded, build a network around yourself, and then go off to the next thing and trying to cast a little vision for these guys. And, it's, I don't know, I've lost the real part of your question that you asked me, Chris, but
you've hit it.
It's go ahead.
Well, you've hit it. And the only thing, what I was trying to get to is your purpose is around loving the people, but there are also business benefits, right? I know you mentioned the turnover was 300% and 400%. I assume today it's much lower than that. You're still having people come in and leave because, like you said, this is not a job they aspired to. You didn't. And you could have, you knew you were on a path to be the owner, and you tried to leave it.
Correct.
So, but the point is, if we do it, if we honor God, it's His business. If we run it His way, we love on the people. There are some business benefits to that, and that's not the initial driver, but it is a beautiful side effect of the way you run it.
Right. And we did. We dropped a 15% turnover for a short amount of time, and it climbed back up, but to 30-35% is probably what we're running right now, and that's still a tenfold improvement and very manageable. And when you stop having to deal with that kind of turnover, you can go so much deeper. And so when you're asking about the benefits, I mean, when you have people there longer, quality changes. You have less of those. You have less injuries. I mean, we started to see financial gains in areas that we weren't expecting. We weren't loving on everybody to reduce injuries, but we completely changed how we were doing safety. Instead of a world of compliance, which is what we're really taught, giving you a write-up, 3 strikes, you're out. We started, sitting down with men and women and like, let's have an opportunity to talk here. And what went wrong? We call them opportunities for growth. And how could we do it different? And none of it's filled out. We used to have these meetings where we'd fill it out and we'd sit an employee down and sign it here. Well, those don't ever end well. We've just learned how to diffuse those circumstances, have a tremendous amount more grace with people, and give second chances for different reasons. But again, that had become something that we were willing to do as a team, and something that I was asking my team to do. But when that turnover got reduced, the relationships that started to come out of that, and the middle management that started to get buy-in, and they were the ones actually impacting the floor. I can't want to do something and make the guy all the way down on the machine feel it without getting buy-in through the entire group. But now there's been all kinds of benefits. The business is healthier than ever. 2020, I don't know how many people have said, I just can't wait for the calendar to flip. I never want to live this year again. I'm not going to say that I would have I don't want to do 2020 over. It hasn't been easy, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. The growth my team has had, the camaraderie that we had, the depth that we were able to develop. My workers, I've been trying for 2 or 3 years to tell them, I don't care if you're the broom pusher. I don't care if you're on the assembly line or you dismantle pallets or you cut lumber. You actually help feed the world. I couldn't teach them how important their job was without the help of COVID-19 and the realization that, their job matters, and truck drivers all of a sudden having pride and then knowing that they're a part of what we do. We've had a financially blessed year, way better than last year. And a lot of that comes down to, we knew who we were when this started. We didn't have to go figure it out. We didn't have to, what can we do and we're not going to do. We just immediately leaned into the Lord. Like, this is your company. I mean, I remember March 16th when they started to announce the potential of shutdowns and what that looked like, just huddling up 100 people plus. And like, I don't have the answer, fellas, but I know who does. And I was able to pray over my people because they were used to it. They saw the owner of the company praying. Now, they didn't have to always be comfortable with that. We're not asking, we don't push Jesus on anybody, but we do ask them, hey, we want you to be okay with it. We want you to know that this is something we do, and you can participate or not participate. You can, go sit in your car. But I can tell you, on March 16th, we had a full audience, and people that had not been interested in prayer were interested in the first time. And we were just able to continue to be who we were. And like, Lord, I don't have the answers, but you do. And we're going to be here tomorrow. And our company became the one stable thing in our employees' lives, where they couldn't go home without unraveling and, being around the news, being around family members that were concerned. They come back to work, and it would take us 8 or 9 hours to kind of deprogram them and like, we're going to be okay. This is going to, and we had, we had our own normal place. And I know, again, I'm off topic, but the Lord has done everything I've been through in the last 10 years. And this year being the 10th anniversary of going through that mess, it prepared us for this moment. We were so confident in who was in charge of our business, and what that was going to look like moving forward. And we've seen, when I say I wouldn't trade this year for anything, it's just because of that, because we were just able to understand our relationship with the owner in a whole new way.
Man, that's awesome. You can't be off topic when you're speaking like that, brother.
That's right.
Promise.
It's been good. I'm passionate about it, and I wrote down a Bible verse here, but 2 Timothy 1:7, and I like how this is worded, but for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and sound judgment. And sound judgment is just how we've dealt with all of this, We've got a big sign up at our company, faith over fear, but it's just like, you can make good judgments and you can experience the peace of the Lord if you just invite him in. And business is chaos. Business, running our operations on a daily business, why we would even choose what to pray about and what not to pray about it. And I found that true in my own life, but there is no scale in God's kingdom from what I understand. And for some reason, we decide what we should pray about and what's too big and what we should take care of. And I'm like, we just dump it all on his lap. And, and I continue to go to him like, Abba, Father, my daddy, just help me make good decisions, because I'm not about to pretend I know what to do in some of these crazy circumstances that we're facing today. Yeah. But when you start to lead like that, your leadership team sees you do that. I mean, I'm not doing it for their respect, but I am trying to raise disciples. I'm not doing it for any other purpose than to give God glory. But then I turn around and I watch them mirror it, and I was like, here we go again. The Bible's coming to life in 3D. Raise disciples so that they can raise disciples, and you start to see them sit down with their team, and it's a very common occurrence at L&R Pallet now that when the guys get together, they start discussing something. I could see like a little bit of panic, confusion, frustration. I'm like, did you guys pray about it? Because I don't know how to just give you the answer. And they were like, no, boss, we forgot. And, and we go into prayer, and I swear every single time it just takes care of itself. And so back to your question of like, do you have any things when it didn't go right? No, but I just keep dropping the hammer. I mean, it's not optional. I'm doing this, I'm believing this. and this is how the business is going to run. And when they come under that and they start to understand what servant leadership looks like, I don't know, even the bad stuff is a blessing, I guess. You learn from it, and have our testimony continues.
It's powerful. If you were in a room today with a CEO, a business leader, entrepreneur, someone who they have a heart for their people, they haven't started yet to start implementing some things, what would be that first step for them? How would you tell them to just get started?
Well, I honestly, I don't know that I did it right, but bringing a good chaplain in is a good place to start. It really is. And not overthinking it. We overcomplicate stuff, and we've created a resource page on our website, and we've added ministry tabs, and we try to give people an area to go to, get ideas. And we have a list. Here's 127 things you can do. Here's 100 ideas. Here's the top 10 that we do. The key is just to start. Just start. Don't make it so daunting that if it fails, you give up, And that's why when I tease, like, a cupcake party is pretty easy. And, we were having attendance parties. Yeah, we wanted to love on people, but there's a business side of it. I need good attendance. There was always something that we're doing, like, this will be healthy for the business and good for the employee. But we can't just, you can't buy them all a new car, but can you just teach them some things? And I don't know if I learned more from the chaplain, Will, but it just, when I saw them coming in and just taking time, I'm like, that's what we don't do. If you have to carve out the time. I have to be willing to not only ask, how was your weekend, but if they start to want to tell me about their weekend, I need to listen. I don't know that that's how I was before, and how easy that sounds, and yet how hard. Am I gonna make that? Am I gonna allow that? And we just started to allow people to I guess to build relationship, and when that relationship got built, this respect was created. And I don't want to tell anybody this is what you start with, because I do think it's different than for each person. But it's pretty easy to look around and identify some of the needs. It's easiest to start with, what are the basic needs? Where are people hurting? How can I be there for that? But gosh, in a time like we're having right now with masks and distancing, and building a relationship right now, having, company parties that I wouldn't even hesitate at my company. We kind of feel like we all finished up messing with COVID in April, and so we're business as usual for the most part. But I would just say, don't make it so difficult that you screw it up. It doesn't have to be spiritual. It doesn't have to be godly. It's like, I just genuinely care. I'm here. I'm present. I'm on a new path, and I'm going to do it again next month and the month after. You can't disappear for 6 months and then show up again. And I think that's really the key.
Yeah.
Consistency is the key.
Consistency.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, it's the same with your kids, right? You're not gonna fool anybody.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And as we've heard from others, and it sounds like you're saying, they're skeptical at first, but they're watching you, and they're watching like a hawk and seeing if you really believe it. It's kind of like that story you shared about, firing your clients. They watch and they wait to see if you really are backing up and you mean what you say.
Right.
Yeah. This has been an incredible discussion. I really appreciate your time. I have some quick fire questions for you to get your input on that we ask everybody. What's a time management hack for you? How do you manage employees and everything you got going on effectively?
I'm blessed with a really good team that I can lean into. That's the honest truth. We've had to be so creative with all the different languages and all the different training practices being actually pictorial in a lot of cases. God surrounded me with a lot of talent, and when it comes to time management, I just simply pray for the results and the answers ahead of time, and Lord, bring it, Lord, take it away. And I know that sounds silly, but I'm just doing business different than I used to, Will.
That's great. Do you have a resource, like a website or a book or something that you just use as inspiration, something that you just kind of lean on?
Well, I don't do a lot of reading. I start a lot of books. I finish very few. But the only two that I endorse are this book by Paul Cuny, which was such a game changer to me, just phenomenal. And we have that listed on our website under the resources tab. But I guess it was 3 years ago, I had Joel Manby come into Denver and do a workshop with me, and he was on Undercover Bosses, and he wrote a book called Love Works. And the hardest thing for any business owner to understand is, how do I love on people? Because we immediately think of mushy love. We think of, we don't think of tough love. We don't think of, I love you, so we're doing this a certain way. I never could articulate it. And Joel did a great job in his book of just articulating what that looks like. And I mean, I've handed that book to so many people just because, he gets it, that here it is in print. So those would be my two resources that I know for me, it just changed my path.
That's powerful. What's a piece of advice that you wish you would have been given 10 years ago?
Don't hire the team that I had on board. No, hire for the cultural fit. I don't think I never did that. I learned that one the hard way, be patient, do it right. It makes a big difference. And I didn't know how to hire. I wish somebody would have sat down and really, shared this with me. But I also know that some of these things that I've learned, the patience and surrendering and just leaning into the Lord, I wouldn't have been ready for that at 25 years old. I want to speak into the life of kids coming out of college and like, wow, you could do with your business, how to have church at work and how you can do this kingdom thing. You don't have to go into missions across the ocean. There's missions work right here.
That's right.
But I don't know if I would have been ready for it, and 10 years ago is about when the Lord started getting a hold of me, and I would have liked to read done 10 years before that, but that's not my story.
Don't we all, right?
Right.
What do you think the big takeaway is from this conversation? What do you want people who have listened to this and watched this to leave with?
Well, I hope I've presented, part of my story well, but I have such a passion for calling other business owners into the game. It's easy to be a bench warmer. It's easy to be this Christian guy that wants to go to church on Sunday and they don't know how to take it to Monday. It just seems so hard. It seems so awkward. And, as a bench warmer, you're never going to get tackled if you're sitting on the bench, and so they don't want to fail. They don't want to get in the game. They don't want to do that. But I learned this year that, if you're not, what are you waiting for? I mean, here we are in this world of fear and confusion. And if you had any reservations a year ago or 2 years ago on should I do this, to me now more than ever, it's like, why wouldn't you? What signal are you waiting for? What brokenness, what crisis in the world? These people that God sent you to help build your company, to do those daily tasks, they need to hear about the Lord. And my job has just been to understand, love on them with simplicity. And when they ask, boss, why do you do that? What's going on around this place? That's when it opens the door to the gospel. And I had to learn this myself, but as a business owner across the table, you don't have to prepare their hearts. That's God's job. You don't have to hit them on the head with anything and today convert, do this. It's like, that's up to him. He changed my heart when the timing was right. And he's going to do that with everybody that walks through your door. He's just asking you to be willing to do it. And I don't think there's any time better than now to step out, because I saw men and women that didn't get involved for the last 7 or 8 years. This Jesus thing wasn't for them. Prayer wasn't for them. They didn't want to come to some of the group activities, and they were front and center, and they were open to the gospel. But why not take advantage of that? So my encouragement is, don't just stick your foot in the pool, jump in. I mean, God's got it. He's got the resources. He didn't tell you that, you're not going to get COVID. That was something that we didn't get to touch on today, but he said, I'll be with you. I'll be with you through this, and that's what he's just presented over and over. He can give anybody the skills they need to get it done. So don't hesitate.
That's powerful. Right. James, this has been an incredible conversation, and I really appreciate your generosity and your humility, and I love your passion, and I'm fired up.
I know you outside of this podcast, and every time I come away from a conversation with you, I'm more fired up. So thank you for spreading the fire.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity and the platform that you guys have. It's not what I do, but it's what God does, and may this just multiply. And I love to be a resource. If anybody contacts you and wants to come visit L&R Pallet, I personally learn by touching and feeling. It's one thing to hear about something, but when you walk into an environment, you can see it, and you can experience it. That's how I learn. And I wouldn't buy a piece of machinery without doing that. And this is an investment well worth doing. So I just want to extend an invitation that any of your listeners want to come and spend some time with us, they're more than welcome to.
Sounds awesome. Great. I appreciate you offering that. And I know that's not just a flippant offer, because you've done that multiple times with many businesses. So keep up that good work.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to find you and your company, where should they go?
Our website is lrpallet.com. LR, my dad's initials, Larry Reuter, and the word pallet. So I think it's a good way to expose yourself to how we incorporate faith into our written materials. You'll see that through the website, especially if you click on over to our story and our family, and that goes back to the whole nother topic, but just consistency. You can't just be a Christian in words. We had to start changing some of our documents, and I invite employees. If I sit down with a key person, I'm like, you look over our website. We want you to understand who we are. We want you to understand who you're going to come work for. And I think it'll give any of your listeners a good peek at how we're trying to approach our entire concept with employees.
Awesome. That's fantastic. We'll put all that information, including the resources you recommend, in the show notes and the description. So, James, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great chatting with you.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. Hope you found some value in today's discussion. If you're inspired and you'd like to learn more, His Way at Work has a number of resources and tools for you. Just check us out at hwaw.com. If you're new here and you'd like to check out more episodes, just go to Facebook or to any podcast platform and make sure to subscribe there. Or if you know somebody that might find value in what we're talking about, feel free to share with them and point them in our direction. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.